Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Vulnerability Hangover. I am your host, Nikki, and right next to me is Enzo, our emotional support pup. I apologize for being gone for so long. There's just been so much going on in my life, and I didn't have the mental capacity to film, record, and edit episodes, but since I was gone for so long, I have lots to catch you guys up on and lots of content to provide you with. Today we are drinking a Celsius. This is a wild berry one. You can get it in bulk at Costco. I think there's 3 different flavors in there. There's the orange one, kiwi guava, which is my favorite, and then wild berry. And we have it in a cute little koozie that our friends gave us. It says, "Here for the booze." I don't drink, so my sodas and Celsiuses go in those little koozies, but we love it. It's the end of October, so now it's officially Christmas time. So starting off this episode, as always, I will be giving you guys an affirmation, and this affirmation goes, "Change is a natural process of life that I welcome with open arms." I feel this one is very relevant for me right now with all the changes I've gone through, not only in the last 6 months, but in the last 2 years, which leads me directly into this episode. Let's jump in. As you may have noticed, I accidentally took a few months off from recording. This was not planned at all. My original plan was to pick back up after my lease was up with my apartment. I got settled into my new spot and interviewed more guests for the podcast. I wanted to be uploading once a week, but that all has changed and my mind has changed as well. There's been a lot of change actually, and I need to catch you guys up. So, as some of you may know, there was a certain podcast episode that I released that you guys didn't really receive very well, which is totally understandable, and I want to make sure that all the content that I put out is what you guys want to see. So, unfortunately, I do think I'm going to be removing that episode. I just don't feel like I'm in alignment with what was told on that podcast, and I also don't want to be putting content out that I didn't initially agree to, if that makes sense. I'm going to be more detailed when it comes to interviewing people because I noticed that with that episode, it just wasn't anything that we originally had talked about, and I want to be, like I said, putting the best content out for you guys. So from here on out, I'm going to be making sure I interview the proper guests that I think you guys can learn from and you enjoy, because some of them may be reoccurring. Back to my living situation, my lease ended with my roommate back in August, and apparently that also ended our friendship. I'm not sure exactly why, but I'm not going to force any connections. I ended up moving into another friend's apartment in hopes that we could both be saving money to eventually move out of the Pacific Northwest and Airbnb hop around the United States, because we're in our early 20s, single, and don't really have anything tied to the Pacific Northwest besides family. And I just thought it would be a fun experience for the both of us, but unfortunately, I soon realized that living in close quarters with someone, it totally changes the dynamic and the friendship. I was living in her living room, which seemed fun at first. It was kind of like a dorm situation, but it was not ideal for both of us. I'm not going to dive into that situation, unfortunately, at this moment, since it is all still so fresh. But as you can probably see by the background, I am not in that place. I'm actually living with my parents until I find my own apartment. These last couple of months, to be honest, has been quite difficult for me. It has felt like one lesson after the other, whether it's with my approach to work, my routine, my relationships, dating and friendships, you name it. I've been tested from every which direction. I ended up going back to work as a bikini barista since being self-employed was starting to eat up at my savings. And my clientele for my business, Candy Media, dwindled down to 0. It was a humbling experience, but there is no shame in going and getting your bag, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, and I'm a firm believer in that. Right from the start, working as a bikini barista, I realized that I had outgrown that job. So I started to have almost a disassociative approach. Being in sex work is not for the weak, but I am old enough and mature enough to now realize when I can turn that character on. It was hard at times because I found myself slipping back into my old habits, such as becoming more restrictive with food, picking apart my body. My body dysmorphia was at an all-time high, and I was also feeding into the drama. One thing that I realized is that I don't think that I can be friends with a lot of people that I work with. The reason for that being is because I don't like taking my work home with me. I find a lot of times that when I am friends with people that I work with, we tend to talk about work. There have been some situations where I've been able to be friends with people that I work with, but in most cases, I just prefer to meet people organically and not really create friends in that environment. I only lasted about 6 months with that job, then I quit. There was a lot of reasons why I quit, but I was ready to be back self-employed, and I was finding other avenues to make money in the meantime. And I've been using a lot of this time to take a step back and look at what I really want to do with that skill set that I have for the long term. I eventually want to be podcasting full time. And I want everything that I do to be kind of an extension of this podcast and the whole message for this podcast as well. I really enjoy doing content creation and exploring my other hobbies. I'm super into astrology and have dabbled with the idea of becoming a professional astrologer. It connects a lot with my spirituality as well. My only problem with that is I have a really hard time allowing myself to have a hobby because I feel like I could be using that time that I'm working on this said hobby to be making money. So I find myself a lot of times wanting to monetize it, and it no longer becomes a hobby, and then the cycle continues. But for right now, I know that I want to use the skills that I have to work a job that I enjoy and pour back into things that I am passionate about, such as this podcast, travel, and exciting experiences. Another thing I've realized when it comes to my podcast is that I have this constricting mindset that I have to be more organized to stand out, or I have to have my Instagram look a certain way, etc. This has made me feel like I'm in some sort of lull, and then I no longer produce content, and then I no longer have a passionate approach to this podcast, which makes me feel unauthentic, and that's the last thing I want for this podcast to feel like. I've been taking the steps now to get organized just enough to be efficient so that I can show up, talk, and give it my all, and be happy about it. I've learned a lot in this past year when it comes to my audience and what you guys enjoy and what you want to talk about. From here on out, expect more raw, unedited short episodes and solo episodes. I will be limiting my guests and interviewing them more thoroughly so I can put the best content out for you guys. I never want to feel disconnected from my audience. I appreciate the love and support since the very beginning. Can you guys believe that it's almost been 1 year since I began this journey? And that's crazy. Being authentic is the only way I want to be from here on out, and I want to provide you with the tools and the lessons that I've learned in this past year so far. One of my biggest ones for me has been my relationships. Let's talk about dating first, because these stories I think will be the most entertaining and the most I've learned from as well. As you know, it's been a year and a half or so since I got out of my long-term, extremely toxic and abusive relationship. I'm not sure when I'll be ready to share those 4 years, but when I am, I will make sure to give you the full rundown of what that experience was like for me and how it has changed relationships for me entirely. It has taken me to this point, 25 years old, almost 26, to actually want to put myself out there and allow myself to explore me and my sexuality and what I want in a partner. Now, these things can change, and you know me, I change my mind a lot, but as of right now, I'm single and I am absolutely loving it. Throughout this experience, I've had my fair share of bad dates, a one-night stand, situationships, and exploring sex. Yes, I said exploring. I'm realizing now it is nothing like what I've experienced these days. I'm learning more and more about what I enjoy and what I don't enjoy, what my non-negotiables are, and analyzing why some of these people I'm attracting are the same people but in different fonts. I'm acknowledging before I start in on these stories, yes, I am a part of some of these problems. And if I'm not learning and fixing these things, I will still attract these people. But nonetheless, let me tell you about some of the wild experiences I've had so far. I decided in the spring of this year that I was going to go back on the dating apps, and if something comes up, I'll entertain it so long it feels right. Through this process, I am learning more about what I enjoy and what I do not enjoy in relationships. Dating different people has been a lot of fun for me because I've met a lot of really great people. I actually ended up becoming friends with one of the guys I met on Hinge. Hey, Jordan. I think there are pros and cons when it comes to dating apps as well. I think that it really depends on how you approach dating, whether it be through desperation or wanting to meet other people or just want to see what your taste is like. I've definitely noticed that my taste in men especially has changed significantly from my past partners. A couple things I discovered in this process is I don't think I conform to most social norms. Surprising, right? I'm entertaining the process of being non-monogamous because that is what dating around is. Now, would I ever be polyamorous? Most likely not. I do get overwhelmed when I see more than one person, but I still think it is fun. I choose to consider myself to be non-monogamous because at times I date more than one person. I reserve the right to change my mind at any time, and maybe if I meet the right person, I will be seeing solely them, but I can't imagine myself at the moment being in a relationship. This can get tricky, and it is important to be smart about your sexual health too. I always make sure I vet my partners out before sleeping with them, especially now with the epidemic of STDs. Let's talk about that. Wear a condom. I'm not necessarily pro birth control, but try and use things that are a form of protection for not only yourself, your other sexual partners, or your current sexual partner. Just saying. I enjoy my freedom, and in the past, I would find myself losing my identity in my partners. I have a tendency to fall too fast and get stuck in unfulfilling relationships. I refuse to allow that, but it's taken a lot of trial and error, and I'm going to share mistakes I have made through these experiences. When I first hopped on the dating apps, I didn't really know what I wanted because I had been in a relationship for so long, and in that relationship it was just super unfulfilling for like the past 2 years. We were just holding on for absolutely no reason, but I would go out on dates with a lot of guys that I did not find very attractive. I was entertaining a lot of guys that I wasn't super into. Then they would become obsessive and it would not be a fun experience, but there's a lot of funny. I think at the end of the day, the type of person that I want to be with has to be someone that has some sort of creative hobby. I really enjoy musicians. If you have some sort of creative hobby, it's really attractive for me, especially being someone creative. I want to be with someone that we could collaborate with at times. In the future, I probably will not be dating any more finance bros or people in the real estate industry, just because from my experience in being in that industry, they have a tendency to have no personalities other than showing off how much money they make. And at the end of the day, like, money is great, but are you a good person? Are you creative? Do you have hobbies? And that stuff is so important to me. I also don't mind dating a guy who kind of has a controversial job. Stability is very important to me. Just as long as you have like a stable income, I don't really care how you try to make money. Also, if you're not hurting anyone, that's also super important. There was one situation where I definitely didn't vet the guy out as much as I thought that I did. I am just going to jump into a story that I totally took the L on. So it was late August and I went to this like super lame event that I was invited to by a guy that I had met in LA. And The event was so lame. It was the first rain of the season in Oregon, and no one really showed up to this event. And I don't really go out and like search for guys to hook up with or want to have anything with, but there was one guy in specific that I saw and I was like, oh my gosh, he is so attractive. And all my girlfriends were like, he is very hot. Like, if you don't get at him, I'm gonna get at him. And we had one interaction where we were going up the stairs to the Airbnb across the street because they like rented some weird Airbnb, and he was going into the area where my girlfriend and I were going to go into, and he introduced himself and his name was similar to mine, and he was like, whoa, whatever, blah blah blah. And then throughout the night I kept looking at him and I'm like, fuck it, I'll just approach him. And I'm not the type of person to just boldly approach a guy and hit on them because I'm pretty shy and I want them to come to me. I'm getting better at approaching them, but for the most part, I don't approach them at all. So throughout the night, I just kept looking at him and he was like not making a move on me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Maybe he's just shy. And then I noticed he was hanging out with a guy that I was talking to earlier in the night. Not in that sort of way. We were just kind of chatting, but we were definitely not attracted to one another. And so I was like, oh, you should watch my drink. And that was like my excuse to start talking to him. And so we talked a little bit, and he's a Scorpio, and you guys know how I feel about Scorpios. We hit it off, and I'm like, oh, why are you here? And he's like, oh, I'm here for my brother, blah, blah, blah. This is really lame. He seemed like irritated. And so I was trying to get to know him a little bit at the show, but it was kind of hard to do that because, you know, his mind was in other places and we weren't necessarily here to see him. I didn't even know that he was performing or anything like that. And then throughout the night, we chatted a little bit and I'm like, oh, where are you from? He was not from here, which is like such a theme that I have right now. I've been dating a lot of guys that don't live in my state. Also partially because my Hinge, my favorite dating app right now, I think it's mostly because I travel around on the app. I've been talking to a lot of guys out of state. Just because slim pickings out here in the Pacific Northwest. Anyways, he's not from here, and I'm like, oh, how long are you staying? And he said he was leaving the next day, and I was like, well, how are we going to go out on a date? And he's like, we'll figure it out. And then he ended up not having a place to stay, and that was when I was living with my girlfriend in her living room, and I was like, well, I'll just talk to her and see if she's cool with you staying with us, and then I can help you get a ride to the airport. First L that I take, I am no longer going out of my way for guys. If you don't have a place to stay, I'm sorry, that's on you. I don't want to provide all this stuff for you. Like, it just, I have other opinions about that as well, but I'm not going to get into that part. So we were at the bar and my girlfriend was like, yeah, he can stay with us. And we like made this weird pact to not sleep with each other because we don't do one night stands. Girl, that didn't end up happening. So anyways, he stayed the night with us. We ended up hooking up the next day and hanging out for the rest of the day. So it was like a day date. Initially, I was not attracted to him at all. His personality was very hard to read. He's a Scorpio, so typical. He was very mysterious, and it was really hard to pull things out of him. But then eventually he opened up with me, and then it was cool and whatever, and I eventually caught the feelings a little bit. I also think that's partially because I slept with him. I'm trying to not be like this anymore, but if I sleep with someone, I usually get really intense feelings with them afterwards. So anyways, I drove him to the airport, and that was that. We had a one-night stand. Turns out, I think he has a girlfriend, and I had no idea. But yeah, that was really weird. And he was like really rude when he went back home. He was acting like he was hot shit and that he found me annoying and all that stuff. So fuck that guy. I will next time raise my standards and not allow a man in my space, especially if I just freaking met them. Another thing I will not be doing is flying out to see a man. I don't care. If I am literally going on a second date with you and it's me having to fly out, like, yes, I am traveling for on Hinge, but oh my gosh, an L that I took recently, I flew out for 24 hours to see a guy. It was fun. It was a great experience, but how do you really think that guy feels about me? He probably sees me as someone to fuck. Let's be real. We still talk to this day, but there has been no plans of him trying to come out and see me, trying to offer to pay to fly me out. I spent my own money, used my own flight points to see him for 24 hours. He couldn't even see me for more than 24 hours. No, I am no longer dating guys that don't make time for me. I don't care. You're going to either make time for me and spend time with me and take me out and treat me nice, or we're not going to date at all. Period. So that was a couple of those experiences. I haven't really been on very much dates since. I have been celibate since that SoundCloud rapper experience. I don't even know if you could call him that. But I haven't seen or dated anyone since. I've talked to people and talked about going out with them, but nothing has happened, and I don't want to be the only one making effort. If I'm constantly finding it hard to have conversations with guys or make plans with guys, I just don't want to do it anymore. But that's just been my dating experience so far. Like I said, I've been dating the same guy in different fonts, but I think for the future, I am going to be dating guys who are respectful of my time, actually want to go and take me out and do experiences. It doesn't take much, honestly. Take me out to a drive-in movie or something. I really enjoy going out and experiences, and I really enjoy a man that takes the time to get to know me and not just want to sleep with me. Like, I know my body looks a certain way and I look a certain way, but that's not who I am. I genuinely want them to get to know me rather than just try to sleep with me right off the bat. So I'm no longer going to be sexually forward. I did record a mini podcast about that and my realization when it came to my sexuality and how I'm so sexually forward with partners and how it's affected my relationships. So I'll be releasing that eventually. And that's another thing I'll talk about later in the episode regarding podcast episodes. But there is so much more to relationships than intimate partners. And I don't think we put as much emphasis on how friendships can also affect things in our life. For example, friendship breakups for me have always been harder because I tend to have friendships longer than my relationships. I have been working hard on improving and auditing who I want to be around with because I'm a firm believer in the people that you hang around with are a direct extension of you. So, another thing that's been happening these past couple of months, I have lost a big chunk of my friend group, actually. I honestly... I think there's a lot of reasons. I don't necessarily think it's just because of me. I think it's also like when I got out of my long-term relationship, I didn't really have a lot of friends because I was so isolated. So I literally clung to anyone that I found to be fun or I found to like me. But at the end of the day, it's like some of these people I met at bars, and I don't really think for myself now, I don't drink. So it's just not in direct alignment with who I am. I also don't want to be friends with people who gossip about one another. That's just not who I want to be. And I found myself getting stuck in that loop, like gossiping about other friends. And I just don't want to be that type of person. I want my friendships to be fun. I want my friendships to be uplifting. And there's certain people that were in my life that I felt like saw me as competition and would constantly put me down in front of men. And I just don't think that I want that in my female friendships, especially. Like, male friendships are a little bit different for me. I've had a couple situations where I'm like, I can't be friends with you because I think you would eventually try to sleep with me type thing. And that also is extremely hurtful. But I want to be around people who want to uplift one another, are supportive, are kind, and don't talk about each other behind each other's backs. And there was a situation where I had a friend go to a couple other friends and talk badly about me, and that's not the type of person that I want to be around. I don't want to be that type of person. So if my friends are extensions of me, you know, let's change that shit. But also, I am super, super grateful for the friendships that have stuck around and been there for me through tough times. Like, you really see who your true friends are when you go through super difficult things. And that is another situation that I'm going to be talking about right now. So, lately, my life has felt a lot like it has been shaken up, moved around, and just like completely obliterated at times. So while I'm grateful for this experience, it has done a significant amount of damage to my mental health and to my stress levels. Like, it's affecting my body significantly. As some of you may have seen, in late August, Enzo got really, really sick, and it was to the point where the vet had told me he might not make it because he had a severe case of pneumonia. It was extremely frustrating because the weeks leading up to him being hospitalized, I had been in contact with his vet, and I was basically begging them to get him in and see him. And they were like, sorry, we don't have anyone on staff. And I understand we're just understaffed everywhere, especially when it comes to service workers and vets and doctors and stuff like that. But I was telling them that there was things going on that I was noticing in my dog, and I felt like it wasn't being taken seriously. So I initially took him into an emergency vet. It was really hard to get him into even an emergency vet. Like, I called, I'm not kidding, 10 different ones, because one day Enzo's breathing just was super shot, like he could not breathe, and he was not eating his food. He eventually stopped drinking his water. So I got him into a 24-hour emergency vet clinic, and they were like, he looks like he has pneumonia. And they told me that they would not start treatment until I paid for it. So the initial treatment that they quoted me for was $6,000. I had just gotten rid of Enzo's insurance, and that was my first mistake. Especially having a bigger dog, he can be prone to a lot of health issues. They don't live that long. I decided, because I didn't use it, I didn't need to have health insurance for him. And I feel really, really guilty that I didn't have that support. And also, I didn't have $6,000 just laying around. So I had to open up a credit card, care credit card, and put everything on there. And even then, when I went to go visit him hours later after we had paid, they didn't start the treatment, which was extremely frustrating for me. He was put on an oxygen tank. He was on IV fluids. He was having to be hooked up to a food tube, just all these things. And it was really, really hard to see because, as you guys know, Enzo is my entire world. And quite honestly, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. But like, the fact that they were urging me to do all these treatments, or to pay for all these treatments, and they hadn't started it, I was so freaking frustrated. And I voiced that to them. I was like, you guys made me feel so bad for not getting him in sooner. What was I supposed to do? Like, his vet was not answering. They said it was fine. What do I do in that situation? And this vet is really well respected, and I just took their advice and, you know, waited, I guess, into the last minute, and I didn't know. It was really frustrating. The next day I called when he was taken in. He had to stay overnight with the emergency vet, but they were like, oh, he's eating and he's drinking. He's able to come home if you want to come pick him up. And I was like, okay, that's great, you know, but they're just like, you can't have him around any other dogs just in case he's contagious or just in case they end up making him worse. He has to basically be quarantined. So when I picked him up, we went back to my parents' house. He did not look okay. He was still having trouble breathing. He was very lethargic. It was very hard for him to get into the car, and he was just sleeping the entire time. So I ended up finding another emergency vet close to my parents' house that was super well respected, and I had a friend that worked there, and she was like, if anything happens, just take him in. So at like 1 o'clock that morning, Enzo's breathing was so rapid, and I knew that I needed to take him in. So by the time we took him in, they were like, he seems like he's okay breathing on his own, but if for whatever reason he's having a really hard time breathing, bring him back in. So his breathing when we arrived to the vet clinic got a little bit better. I'm not really sure what it was, but I think it was because we gave him an antibiotic. He was having trouble breathing, and they were like, we don't have any room for him right now. Call back at 5 a.m. We'll give you a call. So at exactly 5 a.m., his breathing was very rapid. I couldn't even get him to stand up. We had to pick him up and put him into my vehicle, and they immediately took him in again, put him on a ventilator, and started him on another hardcore antibiotic. So Enzo is now on 2 different antibiotics and probiotics, so it could help with his tummy. They ended up keeping him for a couple of days. I was able to check in on him. It was so difficult to see him hooked up to a ventilator, but the emergency vet that we ended up taking him to was way better than the first one, and it was a lot more inexpensive, which was crazy. The total amount, I think, for his treatment was around like $8,000 to $10,000. That's insane. We started a GoFundMe, and I want to thank each and every one of you who donated and shared it and passed it along to other people. We had a bunch of donations. We didn't meet our goal, but that's okay. I didn't expect us to meet the goal, but just the fact that people were even willing to donate or share, like even if it was just $5, was extremely heartwarming. So it did alleviate a lot of the costs for Enzo, and I'm, like I said, very grateful for that. He's now healthy. I can't imagine losing my dog, and I know that eventually I'm going to have to deal with that situation. I don't even want to think about it. Anyways, so we're going to now roll into what's going on housing-wise for Enzo, Willow, and I. Willow's my cat, for those of you who don't know. So I'm currently staying with my parents. This is the first time since I was 18 years old. I just got a job, which is a salaried position. It's in real estate, so it's something that I have background in. In order for me to get an apartment, I have to be working that job for at least, I think I need at least 2 pay stubs, so probably about a month. And then after that, I'm going to go and apply for a lease here in this area. It is not something that I wanted to do, but I just feel like there's a lot of reasons why I need to stay in this area. I do have a surgery coming up, and I've had a traumatic experience when it comes to my surgeries. I want to be sure that I am cleared by my surgeon to live wherever I want, and I also want to be super close by to my surgeon if something were to happen. So I am probably going to sign another year lease here in Oregon. That's my plan for right now. The next thing that we are going to talk about is the questions that you guys left for me on Instagram, and I am going to be answering 10 of these questions. Let's get into your questions. So this one is from my friend Savannah. Oh, by the way, some of these are anonymous, so I'm not going to say the names. Most of these are anonymous, actually, but this one is from my friend Savannah, and she said, something that you've done for your inner child recently that you're proud of and that she loves me. I love you too, Savannah. Thank you for your question. Something that I've done for my inner child, ironically, I think it's living with my parents again. in allowing myself to be taken care of in a way. I have always been the type of person who has a hard time leaning on other people for help, just because I've been met in situations where people offer to help me and then rip that away from me. For instance, my housing situation. So that is one thing that I've done for my inner child. I also created a inner child playlist, and it's a bunch of songs that I listened to when I was a kid, whether it be Disney, Enya, Celine Dion. That is also linked in my bio if you guys want to listen to some of the songs, and my Spotify in general. I have a lot of playlists. I have a playlist for just about every feeling. So that's another thing that I did for my inner child. I do want to dive more into that type of work just because I feel like it's crucial to healing. But those are just a couple of things that I've done for little Nikki. Do you think you will ever love someone as much as you loved blank? It's my ex's name, and I'm not going to say his name just because I don't feel like it's relevant. I guess it's relevant. I'm not going to say his name. Do I think that I will love another person as much as I loved him? No. Because I don't think I will ever love someone to the extent of me completely losing myself in another person. I always think that no matter what happens in any situation, I will always love a person. I think that what I went through with this specific person, I love them to the point of not even wanting to exist. And I don't think that anyone deserves to be loved in that way. It's so unhealthy for both of you. So in short, no, I don't think I will ever love someone as much as I loved him. I think I will love them in a different way. I think I will love them in a very healthy way, and in a way that is fruitful for me and that other person, whoever it may be. Someone asked, does size matter? And I'm assuming they are referring to penis size. And for me personally, size does not matter. I'm not a size queen. And also, you can't really help what size your dick is. But for me, I prefer usually on the smaller size just because I am very petite and I have pelvic floor dysfunction. So size does not matter to me. But I have been with a lot of people who are very big, and honestly, it's not as fun as it may sound. What career move do you think was the best for you so far? I think the one that I just did. I am now going to be a real estate assistant for an awesome team. And I think this was the best career move for me because I'm able to have money poured back into my business, which is this podcast. And with that, I have a more stable income because I am no longer going out and chasing leads, and I'm no longer technically self-employed. So that was the best career move I've made so far. What is something that makes you immediately say no to a guy? Aside from like certain hygiene things, I'm just going to go into certain personality traits. I think the way that they talk about women, if they don't really have any career goals, if they are not chivalrous. I like when they are the type of guy that will even like the bare minimum open a door for me. So if you're not chivalrous, get out of here. Hygiene is huge for me as well. If they have bad hygiene, immediately no. There's lots of other things, but I think I'm going to save that for another episode. I'm going to do another one when it comes to dating and all that stuff. The next question, as someone who has had plastic surgery, what are your honest opinions on getting it? Honestly, if it makes you feel better, do it. But for me, I don't recommend doing it just with how much upkeep you have to do, especially with breast implants. A lot of people don't talk about it, but every 10 years you need to get them fixed. And sometimes your implants can drop below your pocket that your plastic surgeon gets you. And there's also a lot of plastic surgeons who may seem great and they're not in the end. So I am pro plastic surgery in a way, but in most cases I'm not, especially because it can literally take your life, especially when it comes to things like BBLs. Those are so normalized. I think Florida is like known for BBLs, and I think that surgery is just like not worth the risk. Okay, what does your dream life look like? My dream life is completely working for myself, focusing on this podcast. I would love to travel around the United States, maybe even travel outside of the country. I would love to own land and have a little community out there. But knowing me, I might fuck around and accidentally become a cult. But I would like to have a piece of land where my friends and family can live on, and we can all have a little farm and take care of one another and raise our children there. That's ideal for me. Someone said, are you a pleaser or do you like to be pleased? Now, who doesn't like to be pleased? I think I'm both. I am a pretty submissive person, but I also like being taken care of. I think that's something that I am now. Literally, it's a non-negotiable for me. Like, you have to please me in bed and take care of me and make me feel safe, or we just will not continue the relationship and we won't have sex, period. Are you traveling anywhere soon? I don't have any plans to travel, although I would really like to visit Canada. Never been to Canada. The only place I've been outside is Mexico, so I would like to take a trip there, but as of right now, I don't have any trips planned. I do have flight points, but like I mentioned before, I'm not flying out for anyone, so I don't have any travel plans, but I'm sure I will after my surgery, like at least 6 months out of my surgery. Maybe some local ones, but nothing really planned. How do you manage stress, anxiety, and depression? Well, I kind of fell off my self-care routine quite a bit. I'm eating 3 meals a day minimum, and I'm, getting that stuff out of the way. Indulging in things that are good for my brain, like good content. I've noticed that if I am consuming a lot of like negative social media, it directly affects my meditation is huge for me. I have also been dabbling in use and a lot of clarity with mushrooms. I'm going to be doing a podcast here soon regarding that with one of my girlfriends, so stay tuned for that. But I think the best thing is just making sure that you're filling your cup before you're filling anyone else's. And lately I've had a really hard time managing that, because I have a hard time because I don't want to disappoint anyone, and sometimes I feel like my self-care routine, this is just a limit that I have, but sometimes I feel like my self-care routine affects my relationships, which at the end of the day, if that affects your relationship, I think majority of stress, anxiety, and depression is through the mind. So just do things that soothe your mind and help you cope. So that is all for the questions. I only answered 10 of them. But I think I'm going to end this episode here. I also want to reiterate how much I am thankful for you guys for sticking around, and your support and your kind words means so much to me. It would also mean a lot to me if you could please leave a stellar review for this podcast. It helps boost us in the algorithm, and that's also how I make money off of this podcast. So please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I will catch you guys in the next episode, and I promise it will not be in 3 months. It'll be here sooner rather than later, but I'm not going to commit to anything until I have stuff set in stone. But I love you guys so much. Thank you for listening. My voice is getting really raspy. I haven't podcasted or talked for this long. So I will talk to you guys in the K. Love you. Bye.